Picture this. It's midnight over a stretch of ocean so wide it feels like the edge of the world. The sea is loud, wind, waves, distant thunder. And somewhere out there, a warship is moving, but no one can see it. No running lights. No radar beams announcing its presence. No radio chatter. Just darkness and water. Now here's the part that sounds like science fiction. That ship might not even be the real threat. Because far below the surface, in the cold black pressure where sunlight never reaches, something else is moving, silently, patiently, already listening, already tracking, already deciding. And if you're on the wrong side of that invisible chess match, you won't know you've lost until the moment you realize you can't move where you want, you can't talk to who you need, and you can't even tell what's watching you. That's how the US Navy controls oceans without being seen. Not by showing up loudly. Not by waving flags. Not by filling the horizon with ships. But by controlling the most valuable resource in modern war, information. Who knows where you are? Who knows where they are? And who can deny the other side the ability to find out? Because out at sea, the first person detected is usually the first person dead. And the Navy has spent generations perfecting one mission above all, to see without being seen. Let's break down how it works, without the movie myths. Just the real principles that make the ocean an arena where invisibility equals power. First, you have to understand a hard truth. The ocean is not empty. It looks empty from the surface because humans are land creatures. We think in roads and borders and skylines. But the ocean is layered. It's textured. It's alive with sound. It has temperature walls and shifting currents. It has pockets where noise bends, travels, hides, or disappears. If the air is a wide open sky, the ocean is a maze. And the US Navy doesn't conquer that maze by brute force. It uses the ocean's own physics as cover. That's the first big advantage. The environment itself helps conceal you, if you know how to use it. Sound behaves strangely underwater. Temperature changes can bend it. Salinity changes can distort it. Depth can trap it. In certain conditions, a submarine can sit in a shadow zone where sound from above doesn't reach clearly. And that's why undersea warfare is less like a gunfight and more like hunting in a foggy forest, blindfolded, while the other person is listening for your breathing. Which brings us to the true masters of invisible control. Submarines. When people imagine naval power, they picture aircraft carriers. Massive floating cities. Jet engines screaming off a deck. A presence that can be seen from space. But the Navy's most controlling weapon is often the one you will never see on any horizon. Attack submarines, especially, are like silent predators that don't need permission to enter your space. They can track you. They can wait you out. They can block you from passing through key routes. And the most terrifying part is not what they can do. It's what they might be doing right now, and you can't prove otherwise. That uncertainty changes everything. If you're a commander at sea and you suspect a submarine is nearby, your entire plan collapses into caution. You slow down. You change routes. You burn time. You burn fuel. You hold aircraft back. You stop broadcasting. You tighten formations. You start making decisions based on fear of an invisible threat. That is control. Because control is not just sinking ships. Control is shaping behavior. And submarines shape behavior simply by existing. They're hard to detect because they're designed to be quiet, but also because they fight smart. They use the ocean like camouflage. They avoid predictable patterns. They minimize anything that gives away a signature, sound, vibration, even tiny disturbances. And while you might imagine a submarine seeing with a camera, the real superpower underwater is listening. Not looking. Listening. The ocean is a world of sound. Every ship makes noise. Engines. Propellers. Pumps. Even the flow of water against the hull. And that's where the Navy's invisible advantage becomes almost unfair. Because instead of constantly shouting into the water with active sonar, pings that reveal your location, the preferred method is passive detection, quietly listening to the ocean and identifying what's out there without giving away that you're listening. If active sonar is shining a flashlight in a dark room, passive listening is standing still and recognizing footsteps, breathing, and the subtle creak of a floorboard. That's why a modern submarine is not just a vehicle. It's a moving sensory platform. A mobile listening post. And the Navy connects that undersea listening to other layers above the surface, turning the entire ocean into a multi-level detection network. Because the invisible fleet is not just one submarine. It's a system. And the system wins by building a picture that the enemy can't see. Now, if submarines are the predators, the next part of the Navy's invisible control is the terrain. Yes, terrain. Even in the ocean. Because ships can roam freely in open water, but global shipping, military movement, and strategy still funnel through certain critical places. Chokepoints. Straits. Narrow seas. Island chains. Routes that ships must pass through because geography demands it. If you can quietly monitor the doors of the ocean, you don't have to watch every inch of the ocean. You watch the places where movement is forced. And that's a huge reason the Navy can appear everywhere without being everywhere. It doesn't need to blanket the ocean with ships. It needs to control the gateways. Now, imagine this. You have a choke point. A narrow passage. You can't go around it without losing time or exposing yourself somewhere else. You have to pass through. If a submarine is waiting there, you don't know it. If sensors are monitoring that area, you don't know it. If aircraft are circling far away dropping sonobuoys, small listening devices in the water, you might not even see them. But suddenly you're being tracked, and you can't tell from where. That's how the Navy makes wide oceans feel smaller. By controlling where movement concentrates. And one of the most overlooked parts of invisible ocean control is something almost no one thinks about. The ocean floor. Most people imagine the Navy's battle space as surface ships and jets. Maybe submarines. But there's a quiet war happening down where the seabed meets cables, sensors, and infrastructure. The seabed is important for a simple reason: it's where modern civilization hides its most critical veins. Undersea communication cables. Data routes. Energy lines. And strategic monitoring possibilities. When you control the seabed, you can monitor movement, protect infrastructure, and shape how information flows. And again, the theme is the same: you're not controlling the ocean by being visible. You're controlling it by being present in ways no one notices. Now, we need to talk about the future of that presence, because the Navy is increasingly leaning into something that expands invisibility dramatically. Unmanned systems. Think of them as the Navy's silent swarm. Unmanned underwater vehicles can scout, map, and monitor for long periods without putting human crews at risk. Unmanned surface vessels can patrol, act as sensors, or extend surveillance without looking like the classic, big warship everyone watches. And the big advantage is persistence. A crewed ship must rotate people. It must resupply. It must manage fatigue. But an unmanned platform can stay out longer, quietly doing one job: listening and reporting. This changes the ocean from a place where you have a few big eyes, into a place where you can have many small eyes. And when you have many eyes, you can see patterns. And patterns are what modern warfare is built on. Because once you see patterns, you don't need to chase targets blindly. You predict them. You position yourself ahead of them. You intercept them. And you do it without firing a shot. Now, let's come back up to the surface. Because the Navy doesn't rely on submarines alone. Surface fleets can be invisible, too, not physically invisible, but signature invisible. The modern ocean is saturated with signals. Radar. Radio. Satellites. Data links. And one of the most powerful tactics in any environment is simple. Stop broadcasting. If you're constantly transmitting, you're leaving a trail. You're shouting, "Here I am." So the Navy uses something called emissions control, reducing, managing, or eliminating certain transmissions to avoid detection and targeting. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. And it's not just about silence. It's about deception. Because in modern war, the goal is not only to hide your real position. It's to influence what the enemy thinks your position is. Decoys. Misleading signatures. Spoofing signals. False tracks. Even routine patterns meant to lull observers into believing something that isn't true. The ocean is full of noise, including commercial shipping traffic, fishing vessels, and global logistics. A smart force can blend into that noise in ways that make it harder for opponents to isolate what matters. And that's the next key idea. The Navy controls the ocean by controlling the enemy's ability to build a clear picture. If you can't build a clear picture, you can't target. If you can't target, you can't strike. If you can't strike, you can't control. Now add air power to this invisible network. A lot of people think carrier aircraft are used only for big dramatic strikes. But one of the most important missions is something far less cinematic and far more controlling. Finding and tracking. Maritime patrol aircraft, especially, are like the Navy's long-range detectives. They can cover huge areas quickly, deploy sensors, and feed data into the larger picture. Helicopters extend detection ranges around ships, acting as mobile sensor platforms. Aircraft can coordinate with ships and submarines to tighten the net around an area. And again, you might never see them. Because the moment you see them, it might already mean you've been tracked for hours. And this is where the Navy becomes truly dangerous. It doesn't just use one sensor. It fuses them. It takes fragments, sound, radar returns, satellite cues, electronic emissions, and builds a combined map. A map that's clearer than anything the enemy can see. Imagine playing chess where your opponent can see the whole board, and you can only see your own pieces. That's what information dominance looks like. And it's not limited to sea and air. It reaches into space and into cyberspace. Satellites can help cue attention to certain patterns. Communication relays extend networks. Signals intelligence can indicate what someone is doing, even if you can't visually confirm it. Cyber and electronic warfare can disrupt an opponent's ability to communicate and coordinate, breaking their kill chain, the sequence of detection, tracking, decision, and strike. Because here's another modern truth. You don't defeat an enemy only by destroying their ships. You defeat them by collapsing their ability to coordinate. If their sensors can't talk to their weapons become blind. If their commanders can't talk to their units become isolated. If they can't trust their own information, they hesitate. And hesitation in warfare is a death sentence. So the Navy's invisible power is not only hiding its own position. It's also confusing and denying the enemy's perception. Now we reach a part almost no one respects enough: logistics. This is where the Navy's quiet power becomes unstoppable. A ship without fuel is a floating piece of metal. A submarine without resupply is eventually forced to change plans. A fleet without logistics is not a fleet, it's a short-lived event. The reason the US Navy can maintain influence across oceans is because it can support itself at sea. Replenishment ships can refuel and resupply vessels without forcing them to leave their operational areas. This sustains presence without constant returns to port. And there's a stealth advantage here too. Because if you can stay out longer, you can be less predictable. Predictability is visibility. The moment your enemy can predict where you must go, when you must refuel, where you must resupply, when you must rotate crews, you become trackable. Endurance breaks prediction. Endurance is a kind of invisibility. Now, let's put all of this together into one simple model, because when people hear ocean control, they imagine dramatic battles. But real control is usually quieter. It often looks like nothing happening. Here's how it works in principle. First, you deny the enemy an easy picture. You reduce your signatures. You manage emissions. You use the ocean to conceal. Second, you detect them first. You listen. You watch patterns. You use layered sensors, undersea, surface, air, and space cues. Third, you decide faster. You fuse data into a clearer map. You shorten the time from detection to decision. Fourth, you act in ways that don't expose you unnecessarily. Sometimes that action is a shadowing submarine. Sometimes it's repositioning ships. Sometimes it's cutting off options at a choke point. Sometimes it's simply making your presence felt through uncertainty. And if needed, yes, you can strike. But notice the pattern. Striking is often the final step, not the first. Because if you can control behavior without firing, you keep your advantage and reduce your risk. That's strategic dominance. Now let's imagine a real-world style scenario. Not a classified plan, just the kind of strategic logic that applies anywhere. An adversary wants to move a task group through a narrow sea route. They need to reposition, show strength, or threaten something. But they know the US Navy may have submarines in the region. They know aircraft might be monitoring. They know signals might be intercepted. So they begin the transit cautiously. They add escorts. They reduce speed to keep formations. They tighten communication. Less chatter, more silence. But silence makes coordination harder. Coordination becomes slower. Now a submarine shadows them from deep water. It doesn't reveal itself. It doesn't attack. It simply stays close enough to keep the threat real. Meanwhile, sensors and aircraft feed information to the wider network. The adversary's commanders realize they can't be certain of the undersea picture. And that uncertainty forces one outcome: conservative movement. Conservative movement means less flexibility. Less flexibility means fewer options. And fewer options means you're being controlled, without anyone ever touching you. This is the part people miss. The Navy doesn't need to win every fight. It needs to shape the ocean so the enemy can't fight on their own terms. That's sea control. And when you add it all together: submarines, listening, chokepoints, seabed awareness, unmanned persistence, emissions control, air surveillance, space cues, cyber disruption, and logistics endurance, you get a machine designed for one outcome. You operate freely. The enemy operates cautiously. And that difference, over time, becomes dominance. Now let's look ahead. The future of invisible ocean control is moving toward more distribution and more automation. More sensors spread out, not centralized. More unmanned platforms. More rapid data fusion. More use of AI to detect patterns in noise. Because the ocean is full of noise, and the side that can sift meaning from that noise faster will always have the advantage. But as sensors improve, stealth must improve too. So the contest becomes a quiet arms race. Better detection versus better concealment. Better pattern recognition versus better deception. More persistent surveillance versus more creative ways to disappear. And through all of it, the principle remains the same. The ocean rewards the side you can't find. Because the side you can't find can choose when to reveal itself, if it ever does. So when you hear people talk about controlling the seas, don't picture a Hollywood battle with explosions across the horizon. Picture a map you can't see. Picture ships changing course because they suspect they're being watched. Picture commanders hesitating because they don't trust their own information. Picture a fleet that never needs to announce itself because the ocean already feels like it belongs to it. That is the quiet truth of modern sea power. The US Navy doesn't only control oceans with ships. It controls oceans by controlling what can be known. And when you control what can be known, you control what can be done. If you enjoyed this deep dive into how invisible sea control really works, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what do you think is more powerful? Raw firepower you can see, or silent control you can't prove is there? And if you want more videos like this, on submarines, stealth tactics, ocean choke points, and how modern militaries fight battles you never notice, subscribe now, because the next one is going to make you look at the ocean in a completely different way.